time, let's go ahead and kick things off. I am going to share my screen so that
Sure.
I can load this slideshow. So, for those who have not been with us, we are Happy Cabbage. Thank you for joining. And one of the things we love to do is highlight what the world of the buyer and the retail manager and the people who are making inventory decisions at the retail level. Hear from them, hear about their life, hear about their problems, their challenges, their solutions, and their successes. And today, I'm really happy to introduce Ryan. Is it Silve or Silva?
Sylvie, you got it.
Silve, I thought so. Okay. Ryan Silve from Redi out in Massachusetts. We're going to have Andrew and Ryan talking quite a bit about what Ryan does at Redi. But for those who don't know who we are or why we talk with buyers on this webinar series, let me tell you a little bit about us. Happy Cabbage makes retail cannabis ordering easy. We have a platform called Happy Buyers, which takes your POS data and helps you get the job done quickly with data-driven menu planning, ordering, and inventory budgeting. And to do that, we make sure that you save a bunch of money along the way to the tune of about $150,000 on average per store over 3 months. And the reason this happens is because there's just a ton of inventory you have in your store that is likely aging out, that is likely overstocked. And the purchasing process with brands and retailers is structured in a way that sometimes allows for a whole lot of extra inventory to end up on your shelves. And that takes up a ton of your money and then causes buyers or retail managers to have to spend a ton of time going through spreadsheets and creating pivot tables to try to understand what's what and what needs to go. A couple of things we've helped buyers do along the way is reduce their total SKU count by 11%, 14% reduction in the slow moving SKUs, and to really get that like days of supply on hand down by 17 days, which is a 40% average reduction. What we want you to do is be able to reorder faster, smarter, more accurately, and have a lot more cash flow in your store to be able to use to deploy into all the ways you need to grow. We have a lot of really great customers that have a lot of really great results. You can check out some of our case studies on our website or our past webinar recordings of the Buyer's Blueprint with previous buyers that we've had as customers, like Ryan. And if you have any of these POSs, we integrate with you. So good news, you can be on Happy Buyers. We're on the 5 majors: Dutchie, Blaze, Flow Hub, Trees, and Meadow. Maybe more to come, but these pretty much cover the gamut of most of the retailers out there that have the large inventory values that we know that we can make an impact with. Also, if you want to try this out and not just take our word for it, we can give you a 14-day free trial of Happy Buyers using live store data. You can actually start saving money today, and in 2 weeks' time, probably cover the whole year's subscription, if not more, in cash flow resurface. So don't take our word for it. Check it out. Try it for free. If you don't like it after 14 days, it's all good. We can high five and wish each other best of luck. Something new I'm excited to mention is that we have started releasing for anybody who joins a Happy Buyer trial, we'll give you an ROI report for free right off the bat. What we're doing is we're analyzing all that POS data that you have that is currently stuck up in your big giant spreadsheet, and we're determining where can we find all of that savings that we can surface for you in overstocked inventory, in unprofitable inventory, and help you maximize your margins and thus your cash impact. And we'll give you the overview. We'll also break it down on the store level and show you all the categories where we are identifying that data and finding ways we might be able to help you save and free up all of that cash. And if that's something you're into, check us out. Go to our website. You can sign up for the free trial pretty much all over it. One last thing I want to leave you with is please submit questions. We have a little Q&A button down at the bottom, has a little question mark on it, says Q&A. At any point in time during the webinar, you can throw questions in there. And at the last 15 minutes of this recording, we'll throw it out to a Q&A section, and I'll hop back on and we'll tackle it then if it's not tackled during the middle of the webinar itself. You can also hit us up in the chat. We're going to keep an active chat going. Drop questions there if you want. I can grab them and make sure that these guys answer them. But that being said, let's go ahead and kick it off. Andrew and Ryan.
Thanks, Brad, so much for that great introduction. Hey, Ryan. Thanks for being with you right now in this conversation with us. I know we kind of started a little bit just talking a little bit about the fun background that you've had, but one way we always like to start these discussions is like, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what's your background, your role, how'd you come into it? And then we'll kind of like go from there.
Sure. So Ryan Silve, I'm the director of retail for Redi Cannabis. We operate two wholesale businesses in Newton and Natick, Mass. So we are not vertically integrated. We just source third-party products from all around the state of Massachusetts. I've been with the company since before Newton opened. I joined in April 2021. Started as a GM here, helped to open and GM the Natick store. Now I supervise the operations for the whole company. Prior to this, I was in state parks management, so I was a visitor services supervisor for the Boston Harbor Islands National Recreation Area. And then going back further than that, I spent a lot of time doing kind of jumping back and forth in two different roles. I was either in high-end specialty retail, really on the outdoor side with Fjallraven, with Merrill Footwear, with REI, or doing outdoor place-based education. I was a paddleboarding instructor for Ella Bean. I taught outdoor living skills. I've taught survival skills before. Very kind of esoteric and multivariate background. Education-wise, I have a master's degree in history, which I find is very helpful from a retail management perspective because historical training and historical research is all about distilling massive pieces of information down into component parts and figuring out what the key pieces are. So definitely a transferable skill you might not think of.
That's crazy. That's actually really. I was gonna ask, like, of the things other than the survival skill sets that you've definitely developed for cannabis, what would you say are like the things that you've taken from previous experiences, applying it into like your current role that you find are most similar to, like, particularly like on the retail side, like how things are done in cannabis, and then conversely, what is the big cannabis thing you're dealing with right now, or that you've learned that is just like wildly different than what you've had to deal with before?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess on the retail level, because I actually did spend some time teaching at the high school level, and then I moved into kind of that high-end specialty retail. I moved into cannabis because I saw it as an analogous product in some sense because it's a knowledge-rich product.
Mm-hmm.
Where you aren't just selling the product, you're also selling a related experience, which is really synced with the outdoor industry. You may be selling a tent, but you're also selling the promise of what that tent connects you to in a more direct way than selling a pair of sneakers or socks or a belt or anything like that. In terms of the industry as a whole, I think there's a fairly straight line between parsing a lot of these historical texts that I used to and parsing pivot tables and Excel exports and happy Cabbage dashboards, figuring out what those like really relevant key pieces are. And I found coming into the industry that sort of, I guess, tactical and strategic thinking didn't exist at the level I expected it to. I think the industry is still in the process of professionalizing itself.
Yeah. What can you have an example of that?
Yeah. I think as a broad characterization, we talked about this a little bit before, but I think a lot of purchasing from a lot of buyers in the industry is done on the basis of personal relationships and vibes. That's what purchasing is done off of. Too often, there's obviously personal relationships and vibes are both good things that we work to uphold and expand and improve at all times, but simply having somebody come up to you who you know from a previous wholesaler and they're now representing a new company and they come up to you and say, it's the best product, you got to get it. You go, totally. Yeah, we're buddies. I'll buy it. A lot of the industry seems to run off of that. And it seems from my knowledge that every state that newly legalizes goes through a period of transition where that's how a lot of buyers and retail operations are conducting.
Yeah. Yeah, because to your point, they don't have the historical information yet, right?
Yeah,
Or if they
exactly.
do, they're not looking at it, or they don't like know yet to start looking at that historical information
Yep.
to be able to figure that out. Yeah, no, 100%. Actually, that is a good tee in, on the buyer's blueprint. We always like to also start at the beginning to understand. So what is Redi's purchasing process? I get it's not vibes from what you just mentioned. But how right now are you making the evaluations for what to bring in, how to bring in, like all that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Sure. So I'm a big believer, as is my director of operations, Paris Caldwell, in getting staff buy-in whenever and wherever possible, because your bud tenders are going to set the tone for certain categories and brands. Some products are stickier than others, and it's difficult to, let's say, You don't want to bring in a subpar flower, even if you're margin advantaged on it, because if the bud tenders don't feel compelled to push that flower, they're not going to, because flower consumers are generally stickier than some of the other categories. If we're talking distillate vapes, your customers and your bud tenders can, to some extent, be moved where you want to move them. You need to cover your bases. You should have a live resin offering. You should have flavored offerings. You need base distillate. You need different form factors and different weights. But the brands are largely malleable within that space. So in terms of sourcing, we take calls with anybody and everybody who reaches out just to get an idea for what their general process is. And really, we want to understand, what are your COGS like? Where are you retailed? Can we get generalized exclusivity? How's your product move? What is your value add? If we like where that conversation trends, we'll intake samples, we solicit staff feedback. If staff routinely don't give us feedback, they just get dropped from a sample list. It's that simple. So you have to incentivize it on their end for remaining on that sample list. If it's well received, then we start thinking about where it fits in our overall allocation. Is it margin advantaged? Is there room to bend and flex in that? Are they currently in some of our competing stores? Where are they priced at? What do their margins look like? It becomes a very holistic thing very quickly, but at the ground level, we want the staff to receive it well. It's always easier, typically, for an established vendor who we have a couple of product lines with, to roll in a new product line if they've built a cachet of, I guess, a reservoir of reputation amongst the staff. Staff is more willing to try it out.
Got it. And I think you hit on a huge thing about the fact that, like, the industry runs on vibes, including the bud tenders, in a lot of ways, where, like, if they like the product, they're going to talk about the product, and that's going to be partly a huge influence on the products that move, right?
Yep.
And so, like, talking about how, like, you have the sampling, you have the staff buy-in, you have all of that as part of the actual purchasing process, right? But you're still, like, running it through some kind of diligence process at the same time. So you're not just stocking what people like, right?
And I think there's another piece to that too, in that, give your staff, you don't have to give them everything, but give them pieces of insight into why these products are being selected. If you need to have, and you should, a valued tier flower on your menu that maybe it doesn't have the same quality as a $40 eighth, because how could it? Help your bud tenders understand why it exists within the assortment.
So they actually mention it, so they actually are getting, like, that, or else you might be sitting on dead inventories.
Yep, exactly.
Talk to me about, to that point, right? So once you get the product, so once you have the not $40 eighth or something like that, what is your evaluation mechanism normally of, was that a good decision to pull the product in or not?
Yeah, great question. Looking at key metrics over time. So a lot of that flows downstream from the initial negotiation process with the brand. Some brands will negotiate launch promos, or they'll contribute marketing assets or things like that, or they'll roll out 100 sample items so we can broaden their appeal and maybe put 100 sample pre-rolls in the bags of people who are buying other flower. And then maybe they'll circle back around to buy flower from the new brand. But really, it's about evaluating margin, both projected and effective. There's a huge difference between those two. What does your actual COG and price look like versus what are people utilizing their discounts on? Does the product need to be bundled in order for it to sell? And then weighing that at your discretion with velocity and where that fits. So I have different calculations for different categories at both of our stores. So cartridges, like I'd mentioned before, are a little less sticky in my book. So if velocity on something is relatively low, but margin is very high, I oftentimes find I can kind of equalize those two things. So I weight them differently. So maybe I'll weight 40% of that item's score towards velocity and 60% towards margin. And then do that slightly differently for another category.
Got it. That being that, like, you may be willing to lower the price level to bring up the velocity because the margin trade-off you're okay with.
Exactly. Yep.
Got
Yeah,
it.
and we're doing that on we're obviously evaluating that on a week to week, month to month, and big time on a quarter to quarter basis. But we do that on a bi-weekly promotional basis as well. So if I run a special on Fernway 1 gram vapes and they're 2 for 35 for 2 weeks, I want to know how did my sell-through increase within that 2 week period and where did my margin go and did it offset? If I got a 200% sales increase, that's great. But if I sacrifice 40% of my margin, does that work? It's all about
Mm,
balancing those inputs.
got it. Got it. And in your mind, how long does it take to know success, particularly on the new product line stuff from like existing brands, which you're saying is like a lot of where that can come from, or brand new brands? Like, how long should it take you to know that after the promo stuff, after these trade-offs, that like, yeah, this is something we're gonna want to continuously put in reorders for and put it on the like, quote an evergreen menu or whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
versus
And
something
I
that
think
people,
Evergreen reveals itself pretty quickly. Um,
yeah.
you get an idea within 2 weeks to a month if it's going to be an Evergreen product. Um, I generally would give, if a brand doesn't look like it's evergreen, they're usually going to sit on the shelves for a little bit longer because we tend to buy at a higher par level to begin with. So it might sit there for 60 days or even 90 days. But as we reach the close of the quarter, that's when we make the decision to continue carrying this or not. We may allow it to stock out in that intervening period. So I might tell my buyer, we're not buying from this brand again. The margin's not there. The velocity's not there. At the end of the quarter, if they're on our cut list, we'll reach out to them. We'll have a conversation. Where can you go on pricing? Is there any flexibility? Here are your results. If there's no movement there, then we break up, at least for the time being.
Interesting. Interesting. That's what percent of the brands would you say that you look to evaluate end up on the cut list?
Ooh, I mean, it changes quarter to quarter, category to category, but so like pre-roll packs as an example, we cut pretty deep coming out of Q2 on pre-roll packs. We had too many SKUs, too many overlapping strain names, not a ton of margin advantage, too many weights coexisting together. So I think we cut 6 brands from an assortment of 11 in that's a deep cut. But of those 6 brands, I mean, they may have only occupied, we'll call it 25% of the category sales. So they all had small slices of the pie.
Got
Yep.
it. How
And
what slice of the pie are you trying normally looking for in a brand? Do you go for more like niche like things, or you try to centralize it so that like individual brands at least are making a 15-20% or something like that?
yeah, great question. I'd say there are 2 things I look at for that. So it's what percentage do they occupy of total revenue, and also who is generating repeat purchases. That's another piece. So a brand like, I'm trying to think of somebody in our portfolio, Canatini is a good example, Northeast Alternatives. Good product, RSO oriented edible, hasn't been a mainstay of our assortment for a very long time. We typically only carry 3 SKUs. They only occupy about 4% of our edible purchases. But amongst that 4%, the vast majority of their buyers are repeat purchasers. I know they come in time after time, because we're tracking that, to buy the same Sativa RSO Canatini.
Got it. So predictability.
Yes.
Like that's like the big thing is like, yeah, it might not make up a large driver. Yeah, like velocity wise, it may not end up fluctuating or going up very much. But
Yep.
I know if I put in this amount, I'm going to move it over in this amount of time because I know whoever's buying this is coming back and relative and buying it over and over again, and I'm making the margin on it, essentially.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think in edibles, edibles is a category where we tend to buy weird items. Like we've had popcorn on the menu, we've had ramen seasoning, we've had
Yeah,
sugar, chocolate syrup. I like trying those things, and I don't expect them to occupy a large portion of our edible sales. Might only be 1%, could be 0.5%. But I like having those discretionary items in categories sometimes to change things up, because you don't
yeah.
want a stale assortment. You want
Novelty.
yeah, you want a flexible assortment with good margin, but you also don't want it to grow stale on you.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, I think one thing, kudos to your point, a lot of things in the industry run on vibes, and this like the process you're describing has it's like the multi-step trade-off scoring, just like the diligence of the thing, I think is like definitely something a lot of folks aspire to. What would you say in your mind is like the risks of stores not implementing that level of diligence of a process normally, particularly for folks who are like evaluating prioritization of like, well, I might have to get my marketing figured out. I might have to get X, Y, and Z figured out before I can even start diving into like thinking of management of the inventory in this like very like structured way. What do you think the risks are of not starting to actually go ahead and doing that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll just use what you mentioned marketing as an example. If you get all your marketing figured out and you're wedded to brand A in your assortment, but brand A takes off and it's only offering you a 45% margin, how are you going to peel that back? You can shift inventory. You can, to an extent, shift marketing, but it takes time to undo learned customer behaviors.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So it's almost like it introduces unpredictability.
Yep.
Where predictability is part of what you're trying to discover and trying to establish. It
Yep.
introduces levels of elements of chaos. Yeah. Yeah. While we're on the assortment thing, I did notice there was a question of like, do you have target amounts of brands per category that you're trying to carry? Obviously, where like the more brands you're going to have, the lower the velocity. It sounds like what you're talking about is like it kind of depends on the category type of thing right now.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely depends on the category. I run a store-to-store comp every 6 to 8 weeks, where I look at all the surrounding stores in like an 8 to 10 mile radius, and I count the brands that they've got in different categories. Are they over-indexed or are they under-indexed? I think it's hard to say exactly where those numbers are, but it's one of those things where you know it when you see it. If you've got 40 different vape brands on your menu, I think we'd all agree that's too many. If you've got two, it's too few. Wherein the actual balance lies kind of depends on your store. I know that I could probably carry 20 vape brands and support all of them with some degree of sale, but that would reduce the volume purchasing I'm doing for the top five, and then would reduce my cost of goods efficiency for all of it.
Got it. Is there any level of like rock bottom velocity that you're willing to accept?
Yeah, still you gotta ideally be in line with store averages. So especially for use flour as an example. Flour every quarter, every month, I'm doing median amounts for both stores and then average velocity for both stores. And we'll cut at the SKU level sometimes before we cut at the brand level. If I know that you grow a good Lemon X2 flower, but for whatever reason that Lemon X2 has its velocity doubled by another cultivator who's also growing a lemon-oriented sativa, well, Lemon X2 is cut off that menu. Maybe I'll try a different strain from you, but that one isn't working.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, velocity is always going to vary store to store, month to month, quarter to quarter. So think about it in a relative sense of what does your median look like?
Got it. So like percentile basis almost, right? Like
Yeah.
what is it? And if you know that, then you know at least you always are going to be looking at the stragglers. Like it's almost like the concept of if you're always managing the bottom 20% out, right? Or
Yep.
something like that, you're eventually going to like rising tide lift all ships.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, you're running basically a Pareto scale in all categories, where 80% of your sales come from 20% of your inventory.
Oh, okay. And that's good.
Yep.
A lot of folks don't know, like, but that's a good thing. We should be shooting for that.
Yep.
Yeah. As opposed to like adding more inventory with the hopes that 100% of everything will cover 100% of everything. I don't know.
Yep.
Sometimes I feel like just people are just adding things to the menu over and over, trying to
100%.
experiment. Yeah. So don't add unless you're trying to cut and manage as well.
Yep.
Cool. This is awesome. Great. And it's really just like helpful. I can think like a lot of folks like are aware of the fact that they need to get their arms around the assortment stuff, but just like don't know the rules of thumbs or like the mechanisms of the processes or literally just like the structures of how to think through the problem. Right.
Yeah.
And that's super helpful.
Yeah, I think another big thing I'll just tack onto that is that if you're not managing your assortment, you're also not really managing your vendor relationships, because a vendor who you could develop a core partnership with, who could occupy 25% of your total sales, might only be occupying 5%. So now you've missed out on those COGS efficiencies that you could get with that vendor if you titrated things down correctly in all your other categories. I like building a menu where you're going deeper than you are going broad. So I like having 5 to 10 core partners across multiple categories and then cycling trial partners in and around them and seeing if they'll become a core partner.
How often does a trial partner become a core partner? Like how, I mean, to that point, like how diligent can you allow yourself to be in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say this quarter we probably tried 12 different vendors in Q2, and one of them became a core partner.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's okay to hold everything to a high bar. It's not like if you do a little bit more, they're magically going to get better type of thing.
Right.
Like, if you have that expectation set of this is the barometer, like this is the bar, and you have to be able to achieve this bar, that way you can make sure you're preventing the widespread SKU proliferation that can happen of experiment with everything.
Yep. 100%.
100%. Got it. Just like really quickly, kind of running through some stuff here. Thinking about, because you mentioned it, vendor management and vendor relationship type of stuff. What's your advice to buyers about the key things to keep in mind in order to maintain and manage vendor relationships that they should be working on and should be incorporating into their, or buyers or directors of retail or whomever, into their weekly process and their weekly work that is important for vendor management?
Know what your weighted average COGS are. Know how much you're paying for 1 gram pre-rolls on a weighted average basis, because then you can move all your existing vendors ideally towards that weighted average and create a standard for new vendors coming in. So you know that if a vendor approaches you and says, yeah, our 1 gram pre-rolls are $4, and you can say, all right, well, we've already got 2 brands in our premium tier that sell in at $4, but my average cost of goods is $2.95 here. I don't think there's room for you.
Got it. It's basically giving them that very clear expectation of like, this is what you have to deliver.
Yes. Yeah. Clear expectations flow both ways. And I think a lot of times stores don't give vendors clear expectations. They'll just say, not right now. It's not a good time. So that vendor will hit you up a month from now and say, is now a good time? Because they didn't have a target to hit.
Got it. And do you normally give the vendors targets by each individual one that they're letting them know? Or are you setting a target by category that you're letting them know? Or like, how are you managing that with the vendor?
Depends on where in the assortment they fall, because I think we can all acknowledge we've got premium players, budget players, mid-tier players, and you need to manage your assortment in that way. So the target for our ultra premium players, that's much higher. I don't expect massive velocity from them. I don't expect massive turnover. They need to exist in that premium tier. I know that I can't beat them up on pricing because their COGS are relatively fixed. They run small operations. They might use living soil or organic processes. That is what it is. We just want to see generally steady velocity from them. On the mid-tier or the budget tier, they're going to get standards, and they're going to get category-based standards.
Got it. That are standards that from your perspective, not theirs.
Correct. Yep. You define the standards.
Exactly. Even if they say, but all your other stores are meeting this standard, like, or like your competitors have this standard, like you still are coming in with a strong, yeah, okay, that's good for them, but like this is what we need at Redi.
Yep. 100%.
Got it. Is that probably a good time to tee up? And I know we talked about this previously. A thing in the industry that's getting a lot of chatter right now, particularly I would say on the brand side, more on the wholesale side, and a little bit from technology players, is vendor managed inventory, VMI, right? The idea that like you can give the vendor basically a stream of data back to them, and they can put whatever they want into the shelf, right, at whenever they want or something like that, with a certain financial arrangement between the two of them to structure that. I'm interested just like what your thoughts are on where we are at an industry with something like that. Would that be something you would entertain for your stores? Something you wouldn't? Like, I'm just interested in because it occurs to me that like the retail perspective is really lost in a lot of the conversation right now about
For sure. Yeah, I don't love it, transparently. Uh, I think that a lot of vendors, as is, have a hard time accepting no. I can't tell you how many times a vendor has reached out and said, "Hey, I've got this new category. Can we get on a call?" No, we're all good. And then they'll just schedule a call and try to ambush us with that, or show up at the store when we've already said no. Happens all the time. And I get it. They're under sales pressure, but I think they would be better served by listening to the wholesale partners they're working with and listening to what they need. So I worry about vendor managed inventory and having things show up that are done regardless of what we may be trying to do at an in-store level. Because sometimes we're making tactical decisions that don't require the input of the brand. If I decide that, you know what, I'm going to leave these 4 edible SKUs, I'm going to let them stock out because these 4 new SKUs from a competing brand have similar flavor profiles and they're margin advantaged. Let me see if I can migrate some of these people. In an ecosystem where it's vendor managed inventory, they're just going to restock you without thinking about that because their only incentive is to push out as much product onto you as they possibly can. And if you simplify your inventory ordering processes, you shouldn't really need that. So I think broadly, I would only consider that for our like premium partners who we know we're going to buy all these SKUs from them. We're not trying to push them. We're not trying to move them. They're margin advantaged and they're velocity advantaged. Other than that, I don't really want to give them insight into how their brand is moving and what their current stock levels are in a real-time basis. I'll have a call with anybody anytime and be as transparent about data as I can, but I don't want things to show up in my store without my say-so in that way.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly, because it's they're looking at it in a vacuum.
Yep.
Right. And they're operating under, I think that what you just said, the edibles example is a great example, right? Around like you may be making a strategic decision about testing out a new brand that may, if it's as good as what it says on paper, but the staff likes it a lot, may have an opportunity, but you're not going to have that opportunity. You're going to end up overstocked.
Yep.
Right? If the other brand who's just able to push in the edibles as they come, right, because you intend for those consumers to shift over because that's what's best for your store overall.
100%.
Yeah, no, I think it's like a really interesting perspective because like, to your point, like the incentives for the brand is just to make sure that it's on the shelf. Like they don't ever want to run out of stock of anything. I guess like, if you were in that situation, right, and every brand would say, well, please tell me that that's happening, that you're making that strategic decision to do that. Would you tell every brand? I mean, do you have time to tell every brand? Like that's part of
we don't have time to tell every brand. That's the thing. I can't hop on a call and fill every brand in on every strategic decision that we're making. And sometimes those strategic decisions aren't going to go in our favor or in the brand's favor. So we need to test those out and make those calls in real time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to have the flexibility to be able to make those calls in real time.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other thing I was just going to point out real quick in vendor managed inventory is something as simple as running a month-long promotion on these edibles is going to skew their velocity. So all of a sudden, if they're rebuying and refilling your shelves to meet that velocity and the sale ends, you're overstocked.
Yeah,
quickly because they don't have that insight.
And they're not, even if they did have the insight, do they have the incentive?
None. They have no incentive.
Right. Like, and that, I think that's like where a huge part of it is just like, it's just the incentives aren't really done. I guess the question is, I would have for you, so the brands are they want to come with you with this solution because it's kind of like, hammer, when every problem is, a nail, then the solution is what's that? Wow, I'm missing the thing right now. When you have a hammer, every problem is a nail. When you have vendor managed inventory, every problem is vendor managed inventory related. What would you say to the brands that are trying to come with you with something like that? How would you redirect them, or what would you advise them is more helpful for them to come with you if they really want to be helpful in that situation, if they are trying to protect their same store sales and things like that?
Yeah, I would put it back on them really quickly and ask, what sort of insight are you looking for? Would you like sell-through data? Do you want me to give you your category ranking? Do you want some perspective on how recent promotions have impacted your velocity? Because I've got all that, and I'm happy to give it to you. But if I'm giving you just real-time inventory in isolation, it's devoid of all context.
Exactly. And so you would rather give them the cut of the information that they're looking for, and you're happy to do that,
Yep.
but not the context-free information.
Yeah, I think your data and your analytics are powerful tools that you should leverage when and where you choose to as a retailer.
Yeah, I think that I would echo that from the roof, from the mountaintop. That is that is really important. Like your data is one of your most important assets.
Yep,
And is what helps drive like all those decisions that ultimately help optimize the overall inventory and is what's going to make your retail survive, right? Um, Talk to me about looking for the future of Redi, right? So you got all these systems set up, you're doing it. What are things that excite you, right now about like, things you're working on, new stuff? Like what gets like where are you trying to take all of this, for Redi as an organization?
yeah. I mean, our next hope is to take it to like-minded, non-vertically integrated stores and help leverage their data in the same way, kind of in a consultancy role. So we've started doing that and forming buying groups in that way, where we can identify common wholesale vendors, purchase as one big block, um, drive down costs for all of us, and simplify things on the vendor end.
Got it. Wow, that's really cool. Do you mind expanding more on that? Like what, like in Massachusetts specifically, like where do you think the need is? Like where's the gap that you're seeing that you think you can solve with with those kinds of stuff?
Yeah, so I guess I'll use this example. So if you're dealing with a really small grow operation, okay, so let's say someone at the level of like High Ledges or Fresh Connection or Tower 3, where it's a small operation, only cropping out X amount and they're kind of fixed. If you can create a block that simply goes to them and says, don't worry about a sales team on your end, don't worry about approaching new groups. Your grow is what it is. We know what you crop out. We'll take everything. So
Interesting.
simplify it on both ends. Give them that velocity opportunity at your stores. Purchase all of it. They don't need sales. They don't need evangelists. They just need to focus on growing good cannabis.
And as a buying group, it's essentially like, can you operate at the complexity of an MSO
Yep.
essentially without being one?
Yeah, I think about it a lot in terms of like a weight class. Like I recognize that we're a small player. We have two stores. We're not multi-state. We are lightweight. We're fighting at bantamweight right now. And I can't knock out a heavyweight. It's not going to happen. We can't fight Curaleaf or Ascend at that level. But if we behave intelligently and leverage our data effectively, we can go up a weight class and we can fight middleweights.
And to you, what does winning the fight look like?
Operating a profitable business and retaining employees because it's a positive place to work.
Yeah, yeah. That is very true. With the profit, with the cash flow comes the ability to pay everyone. With the ability to pay everyone comes the ability to have great people to work with.
Yep.
That's what they say, right? Like if you're trying to like scrape and make all these like very short-term decisions to get the cash in the bank every single month, like it's just, you know, all the symptoms of that, right?
For sure. Yeah, and downstream of scraping the cash to get into the bank every single month. I mean, we all hear in the industry, all the stores who aren't paying their vendors and who float these bills month to month and use the proceeds from their sales of vendor A's wholesale goods to buy from vendor B and then end up owing vendor A. That's a problem. And you should generate a reputation as a brand that pays COD, that extracts additional savings on that, and can be counted on.
Wow. What do you think is I mean, I have my own opinions on that, but what do you think is the largest cause of why retailers aren't paying back the brands like that?
Folks are cash poor and tax disadvantaged. Those are the two things. Yep. That's all
Yep.
it's down to.
Yep. Oh, man. If only they would just get rid of those taxes.
Yep. Just 280E relief would do a lot
Yeah,
for
I know. Yeah. A topic for a different conversation.
sure.
While we talk about our how we're gonna get rid of 280. But you mean I will say this, like despite that, despite what's an incredibly challenged thing, like, again, kudos and applause to you for like really bringing a lot of diligence and like strong thinking perspective and instead of just being like, I can't help it, I'm always going to have to rob Peter to pay Paul, right? And saying you don't have to accept that reality by imposing like a strong structure on this whole thing. You can actually end up with cash in the bank at the end of the thing with good vendor relationships with, talking about COD, like all
Yep.
these things that to a lot of folks just think, well, the taxes, I can't do anything about it.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, 100%. So cool. Well, I think hey Brad, we just got to the Q&A portion.
We
And I
are
know
here.
seeing off the side of my thing, the Q&A window blowing up a little bit, but
Yep, we got some good questions that came in. And there was one that was related to a previous question that was asked that related to the velocity of brands and SKU and where the cutoff was. The tack on this, and I actually don't know if you answered this or not. I was listening to your answer, but I don't recall if
Sure.
this specific question got answered, which is what is your target margin when bringing on a new brand or SKU?
Great question. 60% baseline. There are a ton of brands that are in stores operating on a 50% keystone, and that might work for them depending on how their business is structured. But because we have so many ongoing promotions and loyalty discounts and points accruals and punch cards, we need to build in additional cushion to utilize for those value adds for our guests. We have to build that in. We're not operating a flat pricing model.
Rock and roll. Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of like promos, there was another question that came in kind of related to something you mentioned earlier, which is that promo SKU velocity. So the question is, how do you work that promotional lift into future demand forecasting when reordering?
Oh, that's a great question. It's tough to do because with Happy Cabbage, I mean, we can block out individual days, but I don't want to block out 2-week windows.
Yeah.
So we try to just, in that sense, I guess we shoot from the hip when considering these promotional lifts because I know I can look at something and say, all right, so we went from 197 units in 2 weeks to 605. So what's the actual floor here? Let's build in an additional 10% to that 197 because I think some of those customers are going to come back and buy with more frequency.
Yeah.
Right, like the promo lifted the like future velocity of the product because it got more awareness, essentially.
Yes. Ideally, yep. In a perfect world, yeah. I mean, so many customers will just buy what you put on promo and then we'll just pivot to the next promo. But the idea is just, especially if you're buying on a 30-day par, you can continue buying on that same 30-day par and correct it 2 weeks in.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point of like the fact that if you don't over order in the first place or the order in management is already down and you're not trying to go for 90 days of supply or something like that, like then you can correct any misforecasting pretty quickly.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just staying nimble, right? Like feels like you can just, move a little quicker if you're not having to commit to such great volume.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we only commit to larger volume with those premier partners. So if I get a short-term offer from a premier vape partner, we might buy 90 days worth of stock. An edible partner, we might buy 90 to 120, but I need to know that they sell, period. And then we're talking about like a year-to-year basis of sales.
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself in the middle of one of those periods and like, something changed and what we expected isn't going to work here? Like, have you ever had to work your way out of that with a premier partner before?
Great question. Not with one of those premier partners, no. No, we've never
Right
had
on.
that. You can see the wind blowing in some ways. So we used to do a ton of business on 0.3 gram disposables. The market more or less has moved away from those entirely. When we first saw the first 2-grammers landing, even though let's say 25% of our business was 0.3 gram disposables, that first month when we saw 8% adoption at 2 grams, we thought, okay, everybody's going to move up. Everybody's going to graduate up a step. And there's data that exists from other states that saw this same migration. So we didn't let it get to the point with the 0.3 gram disposables where we were overstocked, wondering what happened. We were proactive and thought, what was the trend in another state? Because there's always a case example for that same rollout somewhere else.
Wild. I've never seen a 0.3 gram disposable. This
Yeah.
is me outing myself that I haven't obviously bought much in the Massachusetts market, right?
You don't find anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. I don't know that we ever had those in Colorado, or if I saw those in California. That's
Funny.
peculiar.
Yep.
Here's another question. What is your opinion on letting other brands know what your cost is for similar SKUs? I always felt weird telling competitors what our costs are, etc., for a specific SKU brand that is. Like, what do you get raw garden disposables for? If
Yep.
somebody asks you that, like, I don't know, is it weird to tell them that?
It is a little weird. I agree on that. I try to anonymize that wherever I can. So I'll give them like a category range. I just did this last night. A brand was coming in with a set price on 1 gram disposables, and I said, that's above our average cost of goods. This is what our average cost of goods is. They can check our menu and see the brands that we currently have in that 1 gram vape assortment. I generally don't have to tell them directly who that cost of goods is from. However, I have done that in the past. Um,
Mm,
I think that's kind of the last bullet in the gun, so to speak.
To really push them. Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah. Last question I have here is how far out is your promotional planning horizon with vendors?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. So we run a digital advertising like ad deck that companies buy into on a month-to-month basis at the beginning of each year. So when we got to December 2024, we sent out the ad deck contracts. We sold every single month within about 3 days. So all 12 months were spoken for. We run a 2-week promotional cadence, and I know that whoever's on the ad deck that month is going to claim a substantial portion of those promos. We don't have it worked out exactly what they'll be, but I have an idea that it's going to be that brand, so it will be these categories. Strain Holistic Industries is our ad deck highlight for August, so I was on a call with them earlier today. We knew we were going to highlight them, but we hadn't ironed out exactly what the deals were, so we ironed that out today. So that allows us to keep, let's say, 50% of the promo slots open on a month-to-month basis and have 50% of them committed at least at the brand level. Maybe not at the SKU or category level, but the brand, we know who we're going to feature.
Wow, that is a significantly more structured process than what we hear from a lot of folks. Can I tag on to that question? So, like, to that point, what is that process where, because you get this a lot, you hear this a lot of like, oh, I'm throwing into this order X, Y, Z amount of sample units so you can run a 30% off discount on this thing, right? And I think buyers tend to be inundated, honestly, by brands fighting each other for share with all this promotional thing, which can end up with a huge amount of promotional noise. Right now, is through the process you just manage, is that how you regulate and keep and make sure that noise doesn't like gobble up essentially all your margin?
Yeah, that's part of it. And brands are well aware, and I'm transparent that if we get, let's say, 300 1 gram pre rolls as a giveaway, they might not have a slot for a month or two because those promo spots might be spoken for. And they'll go onto my promo calendar as a TBD. I know we're holding those. Their status is held for promo in the back end of inventory. I'll roll them out when we can, when I have a spot and when I think it makes sense tactically.
Yeah, and all of that is to make sure you're not eroding your long-term price level and margin, essentially,
100%. Yep.
through not making sure. Because even though they're like, oh, but we gave them to you like for free, like it's like, yeah, but like I need to be able to maintain a certain amount of buying predictability of the thing I'm making good margin on.
Yep.
That makes up a huge thing. If you start cannibalizing my own price level, right? Like that's going to start to put overall margin pressure in the store long term.
For sure. Yeah. And I think because we've got more mature stores at this stage, we see less of that from brands now, trying to leverage it, and more brands are utilizing it as a way to buy down their average COGS in kind of an accounting trickery way, because the folks in accounting at their group don't want to see them selling pre-rolls for $3 a unit, but they will allow you to buy 300 and get 100 for free, even though the cost is the same. They want to see $4 on that invoice.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Because they're responding to their own 280 pressure.
Yes. Yep.
Wow. Cannabis, man.
I've never heard of that one before.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy. Wow.
That is pretty wild.
Well,
I wanted to ask one more question as we were as it related to retailers not being able to pay their bills.
Sure.
Because I have sometimes seen accountants, CFOs do the math on 280E, And I'm curious, like, if just in a hypothetical universe, we remove 280E today, do you still think that the cash flow problem for paying vendors would exist? Or do you think that would literally be a major eradicator of that problem?
I think it would eradicate a decent amount, but there are always going to be folks who are borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. There's just going to be like a certain amount of people who are comfortable with that level of business, right?
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and there's always going to be a certain number of retailers who are comfortable with onboarding 10 brands in January and not rebuying from them because they gave them promo units, and then onboarding 10 new ones in February and then eroding them and then just moving on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And to that point, I would be concerned that like with the 280E thing, particularly in like less mature or maturing markets that are dealing with supply glut problems, that it almost takes out another barrier for folks to just start continuing for brands to, okay, now I can afford to flood the market
Yep.
Yeah.
with my promo product when I
Yeah,
couldn't
it's an
before.
interesting balance because we don't want to crash out the pricing. Price compression is a real risk that every retailer faces, and we don't want to be California where farmers are burning their crops because the market can't sustain it.
It's a
Yeah.
whole thing. It's a whole thing. And consumers expect it, wow, you know.
Yep.
So
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. Ryan, I didn't get your permission to share your email address here, but
Nope, it's all
I'm
good.
I'm assuming that's okay.
No worries.
If anybody's watching this today and has any other questions, is it cool if they email you?
Sure.
Fantastic. Well, you know where to hit up Ryan then. You also know where you can hit up Andrew now that I'm throwing his email address everywhere. But he's also okay with this. Definitely check out what Ryan's doing. Follow him on social media. Stay in touch with him because I think there are a few retailers in this space right now that are thinking this way, that are coming from the acumen he comes from, and really being able to parse out sort of what's happening. I mean, the idea that you're looking at signals from other states and projecting what a certain category sale will do in your state at a similar level of life cycle is like some really next level thinking, and you've got it really dialed in. So it's commendable.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Ryan is using Happy Buyers at Redi to save him a ton of time and money along the way as he's doing this. And you can too if you want to join our 14-day free trial. So definitely check us out on happycabbage.io. You'll find the 14-day free trial buttons everywhere. And just as a reminder, you'll get this new fancy ROI report to find out where we can save you the most amount of money across all of your stores. So that is it. Thank you so much for joining, Ryan. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.
So much. Okay.